Hi guys, and welcome to this new episode of The Inexplicable. And what if I told you that some of the most shocking tragedies in history had already been written, even before they happened? This isn't the trailer for an apocalyptic movie, it's reality, or at least a version of it. Today, I'll take you on a journey through the darkest folds of time and the human mind. An episode where premonitions, dreams, books, and mysterious quatrains challenge what we think is possible. Because there are documented, written, and recorded stories that seem to have predicted the future. It's not possible. Coincidences, auto-suggestion, or is there truly something or someone that can see into the future? So here are the most unsettling prophecies that have come true. Prophecy of the Titanic. There are coincidences so perfect, so disturbing that it's hard to dismiss them as mere chance. One is the story tied to the Titanic, the transatlantic liner that sank in 1912 during its maiden voyage, dragging over 1,500 lives down to the bottom of the ocean. But the most unsettling thing is not the already tragic shipwreck itself, but the fact that someone had predicted it with incredible accuracy. 14 years earlier, in 1898, the American writer Morgan Robertson published a novel titled Futility, later renamed The Wreck of the Titan. A story that at the time seemed like just a work of fiction, but reading it today after the tragedy of the Titanic truly leaves you breathless. The novel tells the story of the Titan, a gigantic British ocean liner described as unsinkable, the most luxurious and fastest ever built. It crashes into an iceberg in the North Atlantic during an April voyage. And it sinks, taking most of the passengers with it due to the insufficient number of lifeboats. Does that sound familiar to you? Yes, because that's what happened to the Titanic in 1912. But let's get into the details because the similarities between fiction and reality are chilling. The name of the ship in the novel was Titan. The real one was Titanic or Titanic. Both ships were considered unsinkable. Both were about 800 feet long and had a displacement of about 45,000 tons. Both carried more than 2,000 passengers. Both had very few lifeboats compared to their actual capacity. Both struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic on a cold April night. And above all, both sank with enormous loss of human life. Robertson later denied any prophetic ability. He said it was just a combination of his technical knowledge of ships and a bit of imagination. But it's hard to ignore how accurately he described a tragedy that occurred 14 years later. Many have wondered, was it just a coincidence? Or did Robertson have some sort of prophetic vision? Some have speculated that the author was in contact with some privileged source, or even that he was inspired by higher forces aware of what would happen. There are even those who suggest that the novel was a kind of ignored warning, a hidden message about an inevitable disaster, as if the fate of the Titanic had already been written in black and white in a book that almost no one had heard of. Yet after the shipwreck, Futility suddenly became extremely famous. Many newspapers of the time talked about the cursed ship already described in a novel, and some began to see Morgan Robertson not just as a writer but as a mysterious figure, an unconscious seer, or perhaps all too aware. The story of the Titan and the Titanic is still one of the most shocking cases of an alleged prophecy fulfilled. a detail written in ink that foreshadowed an unprecedented tragedy. The attack on Pearl Harbor? The attack on Pearl Harbor, rather than being a magical prophecy, seems very much like a tragedy that was foretold. A very thin line separates foresight from logic. A blurred boundary where intuition becomes a warning and the warning is ignored. December 7, 1941 is burned into our collective memory as the day the world changed direction. It was a quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii when suddenly the sky above the Pearl Harbor Naval Base darkened. Over 350 Japanese planes swooped down like a flock of steel hawks, unleashing a devastating attack. Within minutes, the harbor became a hell of flames and metal. More than 2,400 people died, ships burned, and American planes were destroyed before they could even take off. That attack marked the United States' entry into World War I. Yet there's a detail that many people ignore. That wasn't just a tragedy, it was, in some way, dark and unsettling, a foretold tragedy, because someone, actually more than one person, had predicted it. But we're not talking about mysterious sorcerers, nor about prophecies written in the Mayan codes. No, the premonitions that anticipated Pearl Harbor didn't come from the occult, but rather from the neon-lit offices of analysts, spies, and diplomats. They were rational messages, official reports, detailed memos, warnings that today, in hindsight, seem eerily prophetic. One of the most impressive was the one written in 1940 by Lieutenant Colonel Arthur McCallum, an expert in United States Navy intelligence. In a classified document, McCallum outlined with disarming clarity the growing Japanese expansionism, pointing out the high risk of a surprise attack in the Pacific. But there's more. Among his recommendations, McCallum suggested 8 provocative actions that he wrote could push Japan to strike first right in the Hawaii area. Those 8 recommendations in practice described a sequence of events that would come true exactly 1 year later. Some scholars have questioned whether it was truly a prediction or something more unsettling. But McCallum wasn't the only one. Weeks and months before the attack, warnings were repeatedly ignored. On November 27, 1941, just 10 days before the attack, the War Department sent a warning to all military installations in the Pacific, titled War Warning. However, the message was vague and did not specify Pearl Harbor as a possible target. On the contrary, the focus was on the Philippines or Malaysia. There was also the mysterious Japanese telegram, intercepted and decoded just hours before the attack. The Americans, thanks to the secret decryption program MAGIC, had access to numerous Japanese diplomatic communications. And right during those hectic hours, a disturbing message emerged. A Japanese request to deliver a declaration at 1 p.m. Washington time, which corresponds to 7 a.m. in Hawaii. A few minutes later, the bombs began to fall. There was also an anonymous call to the American embassy in the Philippines days earlier, warning of an imminent disaster at Pearl Harbor. The warning was seen as unreliable. No one wanted to believe it. The testimonies of diplomats, spies, and even civilians who sensed the danger piled up like pages torn from a book that no one wanted to read. As if history were desperately trying to make its voice heard, but was systematically silenced. The debate is still heated today. Some talk about incompetence, while others suspect a deliberate blindness on the part of the leadership. And some, more cynically, suggest that Washington, even after picking up on the clues, let things slide to provoke a casus belli, a pretext to enter the war and lift an America still marked by the Great Depression. But that's not the most troubling part. What leaves us stunned after all these years is the feeling that the future was screaming. It was screaming in the forgotten memos, in the overlooked cables, in the ignored insights. And so you start to wonder, what really is a prophecy? Is it simply connecting the dots before they form a line? Is it rational intuition or something more subtle, something that escapes logic but keeps coming back like an echo from tomorrow? Pearl Harbor, in this sense, teaches us a chilling lesson. Not all prophecies are written on scrolls or whispered in a trance. Some are actually typewritten and lying at the bottom of a drawer, and that's exactly why they're even scarier. How many rational prophecies are we overlooking? How many warnings are buried in data, reports, and forecasts that people avoid because they're uncomfortable? And above all, what will happen when we realize we've ignored them? Once again? Nostradamus and the Rise of Hitler. In the heart of the 16th century, a man wrote dark and mysterious verses destined to survive through the ages. Michel de Notre Dame, better known as Nostradamus. His enigmatic quatrains have fueled fascination with mystery and fate for centuries. But one in particular has sent chills down the spines of many scholars, because it seemed to describe with surprising accuracy the rise of one of the darkest figures in modern history, Adolf Hitler. One of the most frequently quoted quatrains goes like this: "From the depths of Western Europe, a young child of poor people will be born, who with his tongue will seduce a great army. His fame will grow toward the kingdom of the East." Anyone reading this with historical hindsight can't help but notice some unsettling similarities. Hitler was born in Austria in modest circumstances and became known for his oratory skills. He was able to mobilize the masses and push Germany toward a world war. He even influenced relations with the Far East, especially with Japan. But that's not all. Another quatrain, even more frequently quoted, is this one: "Wild beasts driven by hunger will throw themselves into the rivers. Most of the army will be against Hitler. The Great One will be dragged into an iron cage when the son of Germany observes nothing." It's not hard to notice how much this name resembles Hitler. Of course, according to many scholars, Heister is actually an ancient Latin name for the Danube or the Danubian region, and not a proper name. Some people reject this hypothesis, believing the word too closely resembles the famous dictator's name. Here, the context is unsettling. It speaks of a great army against Heister, and of a son of Germany who observes the chaos without intervening. It's easy for anyone to see Hitler in these words. But this is exactly where the debate begins. Many critics pointed out that the real power of Nostradamus's prophecies lies not so much in their accuracy as in their ambiguity. His quatrains are intentionally cryptic, often combining French, Old French, Latin, and allegory. This leaves them open to countless interpretations, and it is especially after events never before that people find correspondences. It's called retroactive prophecy. In short, it's easy to read meaning into Nostradamus's texts only after history has already taken its course. The fascination continues as amid many obscure and seemingly meaningless verses, some images strike directly at the heart. Famine, war, a people overwhelmed, and a great man who embodies evil. What is certain is that the name of Hitler appears, according to many, in the lines of a book written almost 400 years before the Second World War. And even today, in the silence on certain nights, someone reopens those dusty pages, trying to decipher the signs of the future. September 11th. September 11th, 2001. The world stood still. 2 planes strike the Twin Towers in New York, a third hits the Pentagon, and a fourth crashes in Pennsylvania. Images of the worst attack on American soil are broadcast live worldwide. But what if I told you that this nightmare had, in a way, been predicted? No, we're not discussing intelligence services or geopolitical analysis. We're talking about books, cartoons, songs, and even ancient prophecies. all before 2001. Were these coincidences or ignored warnings? Let's start with an author who made international attention his trademark, Tom Clancy. In his 1994 novel, Death of Honor, the Italian title is Debito d'Onore. A commercial airliner is hijacked and deliberately crashed into the United States Capitol. Yes, you heard correctly. 7 years before September 11, Clancy had already imagined a kamikaze attack using a civilian plane against a symbol of American power. Most disturbing is that the author did meticulous research to make it realistic. But the oddities don't end here. In 1997, 4 years before the attack, the band The Coup, an American hip-hop group known for its political activism, released an album titled Party Music. The original cover shows the group's leader setting off a detonator while the Twin Towers explode behind him. The album was pulled and re-released with a new cover after the attacks. But that first image became an almost prophetic-ish. And then there are The Simpsons, the very famous episode The City of New York versus Homer Simpson, which aired in 1997. We see a scene where Lisa's holding a flyer that says New York $9 next to an image of the Twin Towers. The visual effect, well, a disturbing 9/11. It only takes a second to catch it. Just a graphic coincidence, most likely. Still, that episode is legendary among devoted fans. But the disturbing predictions don't come only from pop culture. There are those who, according to some, predicted everything decades earlier. We're talking about the infamous Baba Vanga, the Bulgarian mystic nicknamed the Nostradamus of the Balkans, who has died. In 1996, she allegedly left prophecies recorded by her followers, with one standing out above the rest. Most interpretations say Vanga reportedly said this. Horror, horror. The American brothers will fall after being attacked by steel birds. The wolves will howl in the bush, and the blood of the innocent will flow. American brothers, like the Twin Towers, similar side by side. Steel birds, the airliners. The bush is the English word bush, like the president in office in 2001, George Bush. All this said by a Czech woman decades before the events. Is it possible? Obviously, there are no official documents proving that Vanga actually said those exact words. Her prophecies have been orally passed down, often freely translated and interpreted. But this hasn't stopped the mystery from growing and going viral. So, in light of all this, is it possible to say that the attack on the Twin Towers was predicted, and not just on a single occasion? Or was it just the result of simple coincidences? The death of Lincoln. Imagine dreaming of your own death, watching as a powerless spectator the exact moment when your life will end. Now imagine that dream coming true days later. It sounds like a horror movie prologue, but it actually happened. And the main character isn't just anyone. It's Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States of America. The story I'm about to tell you was reported by one of his closest collaborators, his friend and personal secretary, Warren Hill Lemon. And it's as unsettling as it is well documented. A few days before his death, Lincoln shared a disturbing dream. He was in the White House wrapped in an unreal silence. He walked through deserted corridors, guided by a sense of anxiety and foreboding. At a certain point, he heard distant sobs. They were coming from the East Room. He approached slowly and found a group of people in mourning, standing next to a catafalque. Then he asked, "Who has died in the White House?" One of the guards replied, "The president has been assassinated." Lincoln woke up shocked. It wasn't the first time he talked about strange dreams. He was known to have a certain interest in the supernatural. He often told his wife and some in his entourage about his visions and premonitions. But that time it was different. The scene in the dream was vivid, realistic, and the feeling was so intense that he decided to share it with Lamont, describing it in detail. The dream, alas, turned out to be prophetic. It was April 14th, 1865, when Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth at Ford's Theater in Washington. Exactly as in the dream, he was fatally shot while he was in a public place. His body was actually displayed in the Estella Room at the White House for official visits, and Lamont wrote everything in a diary. And although some historians have questioned the accuracy of the details, the fact that Lincoln had premonitory dreams and openly talked about them before his death is considered authentic. There are several testimonies, including that of his wife Mary Todd Lincoln. So, was it just a dream or something else? Perhaps the president's mind had sensed the shadow of the coming tragedy. Or is there really a thin thread that connects the world of the living to the invisible one, and that sometimes, for a few moments, lets itself be seen? It's time to give the floor to the slovenly ones. At this point, the question arises. There's the Pearl Harbor part, which, as I pointed out, was mostly a prediction born out of logic. The other prophecies, the ones that seem to have come true, have magically really done so. Or are we the ones who want to see them that way? The skeptic's scientific opinion is clear. From a psychological point of view, there is a well-documented phenomenon called the Forer effect. According to this mechanism, we tend to recognize as personalized messages that are actually so vague they could apply to anyone. It's the same effect that makes horoscopes convincing. Phrases like, "You're a sensitive person, but you hide your feelings." They could fit 90% of the population, yet they seem tailor-made for us. Then there's the confirmation bias, a real mental trap. When we believe in something, our brain unconsciously selects only the information that confirms our belief, ignoring everything else. If a prophecy says a great tower will fall in the new millennium, and then a tragedy like September 11th happens, our mind connects the dots, even if in reality those dots may never have had any connection. And there's another invisible trick, hindsight readings. Often, prophecies are reinterpreted after an event has already happened, adapting the words, the symbols, even the punctuation to make them seem incredibly accurate. It's like reading the last page of a book and then convincing yourself that the whole plot was leading exactly to that ending. But are we really sure it was like that? Still, something inside drives us to believe it. Why? Because the future terrifies us. It's uncertain, dark, beyond our control. If someone claims to have seen it or knows what's ahead, their voice, no matter how absurd, comforts us. It gives us the illusion of order in a chaotic universe, a plot amid the noise. After all, human beings are storytellers by nature. We understand events by linking them into stories, and prophecies are powerful, archetypal, mysterious stories. They are flames lit in the darkness of the unknown. But as always, I leave the final word to you. What do you think about these supposed prophecies? Are they truly as extraordinary as claimed? Or does the scientific explanation seem more convincing to you? Let me know in a comment. The Unexplainable Podcast is an original show, written and directed by Luca Perella, with sound by Matteo D'Alessandro. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, or share it with your friends. Greetings, and see you at the next episode of The Unexplainable.